had it. Why is it like not only on my camera? Because it has it here. See, I could just make this video. If I could just make this video that it vanished on me. Let's see what happens if I do this. Okay. All right. I had a very special privilege in this life. When my family lived in Lindale, Georgia, I learned our home would have its first overnight visitor. My father, Cecil, had a brother, a younger brother. Granny and Paw would be our guests eventually too, and I've got to stop and tell mom's favorite story about Paw. He wanted to show how tough he was. So he took on some peppers because, you know, he loved him some spicy food. Now, that was the most laid-back man I think I ever knew. And he loved us all, too. Paw had some jalapenos first and bragged about how that was nothing to him. So Brenda got him some habaneros to go with a special plate, homemade cornbread and beans. Mom's food had flavor back then, so even a skinny guy like Paw went back for plate two. At least it went over better than that time we went down to Atlanta and Mama or Lee, must have been one of the twin girls, because whichever one of you it was, you didn't thaw the chicken first and it came out of the oven cold and raw. Well, anyway, let's see. Paw sat there with tears welling up in his eyes. He poured the juice onto his cornbread, too. I don't recall if they had greens, but it goes well, so let's throw them in. He keeps on eating and eating, and tears stream down his cheeks as he keeps putting it away. You like it? Mom asked. It's good, he said, wiping the sweat off his forehead. I honestly can't remember anyone Paw didn't love. So that story's my gift to Roger. I'm sure his soul found his mom and dad first thing. He knows so much more now, and y'all, he's not in pain. And that was his profound wish to God, to not hurt all the time anymore. It amplifies loneliness and depression. Well, so if you have any tears to shed, think not of what was meant to be as some wrong done in the world, but Roger was love, and love never dies, and he will always be with you. My first impression was how nice he was to us, how happy and carefree he was. When he was 14, he was half my parents' age. He was bursting with teen energy. He couldn't wait for a walk every day. He also showed us how to stay fit. Any conditioning I did as a boy, which wasn't enough, was inspired by Roger. He also liked to say things that were wise and give advice, didn't he? I mean, more than anyone else that I knew. I guess he watched a lot of Kung Fu, the TV series. But what I learned from him includes not having kids, but being very good with children. He was truly gifted at interacting with kids. He kept the spirit of fun alive until he couldn't find the heartbeats to do it anymore. If that made you feel a skip yourself, just dedicate a few heartbeats of fun to our Uncle Roger. I never knew anyone who loved citrus more, but God, especially lemons. It sucks that salt is no good in high regular doses, but he could eat a lemon like an orange. He probably wasn't cut out for drinking, which I did try to get through to him ages ago, but he was always on the search for something cool and fun. I knew him when the world was his oyster, working for Bar L, making good money down in Franklin, Georgia. See, there was a time when life was kicking Big Cecil around a bit, and Roger invited his big brother to come stay with him long enough to get settled into a new place. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was little C growing up, by the way. But as you can see, I traded up, got me a bigger C. So, where was I? Let's see. See, there was a time when things were going really rough for us, and Roger invited us to come settle in there with him for a little bit while we are getting moved into a new place. He had the first beaded curtain I ever saw between the kitchen and the living room. There was this big ass velvet painting of the devil. I loved it. He was standing on a staircase with a cape. Oh man. Roger had a board game, not Monopoly, but something about money, and Deb and I had a grand time playing it together. I think we roped some of the others into it. Dad was not yet adjusted to his family man potential. He was a very brooding fellow at the time when Beckhart played out and we were bankrupt. But Roger showed me that it is okay for a man to show warm regard and love and be open with his feelings. That may well be the single greatest gift Roger Homer Disharoon had. The summer I spent in Noonan, Georgia, seemed to come so quickly. I was super sad we were leaving Rogers after only a couple of days or so, because of course I wanted to live with him forever. He was probably eager to resume dating in full swing, so things worked out for all of us. Noonan was only one summer, but it was one to remember, and Roger even came to visit. That's the one where we hit the peach stand. He gave me 3 lifelong loves: long walks, good talks, and yellow peaches. Years later, he gave me my first karate lessons, going over the basics, the code of honor and everything. He tried to be the very coolest because he was fed by the power of your belief and mine. We believed Roger was awesome, and he cultivated it. He was the freest human being I knew growing up, you see, so I couldn't be the same without him then. I don't think anyone could know what would happen when a free spirit became the head of a household of his recently orphaned niece and nephews, but he was great at cooking and cleaning his place, always was. Do you think I would have wanted to live with him? Always? If it was a dump? He always cared for his homes. He lived for the fairest sex, his family, and his own very unique walk with God. I hope they're having a peach as we speak. Amen. You better believe he and Toby had a big surprise for me by the side of the house when I was 18. He laughed a year later and told me of the motivation behind those old long walks, which explained why they took so long to get to a place where no one would see him. And that's why he always smelled like cologne. And probably now I understand how a kid got to have such mind-blowing talks with his uncle. Let's just say it ain't any wonder I ended up in Boulder. For the values Roger had in those years that he most formed me, I can say my new city is a kind of Shangri-La of many people who have those same far-out ideals and peace and love. Now, how I stay here after finding out that Unc and the company I work for died at the same time is still an unfolding mystery, but I'm not miserable. Moving from city to city, like Roger used to, moving even once every 8 years, like Ange and I managed. Such things are actually very hard to do because you know how impossible it's become to just pick up and live somewhere else nowadays. Some people stay in their same community a very long time, and I see stability in that. Laura used to knock a home run with Leela. Her own child rearing was great. I know our family's been through rough years, but there's been a lot of love and honest efforts made. Don't ever give up hope. We've been taken far away and high up a mountainside. We were born to keep climbing, but never forget the many people whose love took us so far across the wilderness to this point and began that climb. Well, Uncle Roger's playground of the 1970s and 80s is just memories now. But I picture his Devin being a bit like that. He's got his hair back and his mustache. He's ready to go like it's Saturday afternoon. It's just now our ever restless Roger is at peace. And no more toothaches. Man, those just killed him when they'd get them. You know, it's funny because I formed my heroism of Roger in the days when he was the most footloose and fancy free. And some of you, when he was a stable part of your household, doing his part to keep the commune happy, well, that's how you know him. But he's gone because there was nowhere left to belong. No more distractions from the pain and loneliness. And even a guy who always tried to stay in good shape has to have a reason to live. He wasn't really made for the reflections of old age, but don't think he hadn't lived a full internal life here. He never meant to get old, but rather to live life to the fullest. The pain of our family is an old one. Cousin Fred Disharoon died recently, but he lived in California and Georgia both. Georgia in the fall every year. Fred asked me about Roger Disharoon, wanted to know his story. It's the last conversation Fred and I ever had. Who was he? All he knew was when our pawpaw was a teenager, he and his two brothers and dad went over to his uncle's, drunk as skunks for not the first, but the last time. If they couldn't get sober, he told them, don't bother coming back. And those sides of the family never spoke again that I know of in this life. You might think no one will remember you and no one appreciates you as if you were never a thought to anyone, but someone's asking about you. Someone wants to know your story. You're part of a family. Families are a way to endure, and families are a way we go on. Young me took in a lot of vocabulary from Uncle Roger. That's trip. Classic. Not today. That guy who stole cassettes out of cars at work and Magic Wand for Christmas gifts one year also had a sneaky side. But so many of the scam ideas were so bad. The problem was, I thought, people dumb enough to fall for that didn't have money, but I have really revised myself on that proposition. Money and brains don't always have the relationship you'd assume, does it? Ange and I used to listen to his proposals on ways we could all get rich pretty quickly. And I still had no idea how much you could get away with, especially these days if you do it online. But we'd laugh and say, with Roger, you can see the man moving behind the curtain. But what he knew from experience was people are a lot dumber than I think. What I know from experience now is Uncle Roger kind of was right about that at the time. He made sure I loved classic rock, played 96 rock, Z93 down at the gas station where he worked for Mama and Paw. Well, even in later years, he'd call Kylie up at the Rebel. You know, I do believe that he won some free tickets to go see Def Leppard and Poison. Good old Roger. Yeah, he loved that whole album by Boston so much, you know. I sat reading Iron Man comic books that I bought for a dime each from 1973, 74, yellowing junk that inspired me to make bad drawings. And I'd read and write and draw down at the gas station while John Bigham, you know, the fellow in the wheelchair, he worked on with the leather face. He worked on tillers, and Roger changed tires or nothing at all, sitting there with his feet up on the desk with the two fans going, saying, whew, hot. For lunch, we get ham and cheeses from Brenda's place, you know, Mom and Dad's short order joint down the street. Look around the world and you see I had it really good. I couldn't even go play my crazy, I could even go play my crazy pretend behind the service station where no one could see me, bringing to life what I hadn't enough skill to draw, thinking carefully to make how to make my own rip-offs of Marvel characters original. I was a real loner until late in high school, but those were the years that some of us shared in Shannon, Georgia, on Todd Road by the old model school, where my mama and my Aunt Linda attended for about 10 years and graduated. The smell of cigarettes, velvet paintings, pro wrestling, hot dogs on white sandwich bread. It's all this time for me. It was the beginning of the Atlanta clan migrating to Rome, Shannon, Somerville. I don't have a lot of money, especially not after last Thursday, but I have made a lifetime of memories. I hope today I brought a sense to some of you that home is a place you carry inside. Maybe you set it up in other places, but while you seem to leave it, it never leaves you. That whole class of people who never leave their hometown, I don't know why, but for some reason that is not the Disharoon way. Most of us decide to pick up and ramble elsewhere. How do you think Fred ended up in San Diego, California, and how did I meet him? Well, not the way you would figure, but that begins the story of another funeral. And this one is about Roger Disharoon. Not what he needs, for the universe has seen to that. This is about our need for him. But I hope you see, in God's plan, however diabolical it sometimes seems, he served our need. He served God to make a heart that moved throughout the whole of Irene and Cecil's family. He was probably the most universally beloved of us all, by us all. He connected us all. We're like Roger. Can't sit still without biting our nails if we aren't stimulated by where we are. We've never been interested in just fitting in with everyone else, even though we all try to make our own sanctuaries. If no one else comes, there's always Jesus. But we all believe we all love and deserve love, and we are people passionate about life. You have to understand. If you have no passion for tomorrow, then the Disharoon inside you has already died. Let me tell you something. And if you knew Roger back when, you know just what I mean. When he lived out in West Rome, I used to visit him often. He'd take me over to visit Obi sometime, but usually we'd hang there at the house. I think one of the first times Angela ever came over with me, we were engaged 6 weeks, so that's a narrow window of time. Roger gave us his martial arts demonstration. He didn't have a workout partner most of the time, but he had perfected his system of fast, high kicks and chops. Roger whirled around, and I have not practiced it, and I am not going to imitate it right here. That took practice. Roger whirled around that little bitty living room without touching a thing, swift like the wind, light as a feather. It was the most graceful thing I ever saw in a living room. Roger Homer Disharoon. Not one time I saw you did you fail to tell me, I love you, Lucy. You were the most charming and charismatic person I had encountered in my sheltered existence, but you were so much more too. The babysitter for life that went with your whole teenager for life motif, you know. Well, congratulations. The way you wanted me to always think of you has come true. To me, this is who you'll be forever young. Let me tell y'all, I woke up Friday too early and it was afternoon, so good luck just shutting my eyes to rest up. I was feeling shitty finally about the sad story of Roger's end. My career teaching kids from my home and anything, but his part really troubled me, thinking about his unhappiness. I drove back from the grocery store unhappy with the world now that we had all fished with, and ate with, and walked with, and hugged, watched TV with Roger, all we ever would. I didn't want to cry because that would mess up my head inside and be all snotty. Besides, he's in golden lands and free of pain, and the only sorrow is for those who believe they can no longer be with him. But I talked to Angie about it in a minute, and I thought of this time he was troubled, sitting by me on the couch. I recall putting my hand on his shoulder to say, it's going to be all right, man. And as I told her and I put out my hand, I had the vivid sensation of touching his troubled shoulder as though he were indeed at my side. And she helped me realize, if yes, there he was, then if he is sad, it is because he wants to be remembered. He wants to be felt. He wants still to be a part of love. never ending. So, would you do that? Would you take Roger's example of cheer and optimism with you and feel him with you when you most think of his absence? He would never have wanted you to be so sad, you know. If God can give Roger anything he wants right now, he only wants to be remembered. Remember, he did stand for something, even if he was forever in conflict between wisdom and foolishness. That is what makes the human race sometimes great. He's forever part of your life and mine. God bless Roger Homer Disharoon, born the day after Christmas in 1960, died August 6th. What a very good job you did at spreading your spirit. It is with us always. From We'll See. Thanks. We love you, Roger.